October 19th, 1942. The moon had not risen over the Blackwater, and the night hung heavy with humidity. Lieutenant Robert Lynch crouched behind the wheel of PT-48, eyes fixed on the faint silhouettes cutting through the inky water. 3 Japanese Datsu barges moved slowly, their engines humming like distant mechanical predators. The smell of salt and oil mingled with the tension in the air. At 26, Lynch had survived 14 night patrols, 14 missions where torpedoes had failed, where machine guns had barely scratched the enemy. Tonight felt different. There was a restlessness in the crew, a silent agreement that standard tactics would no longer suffice. Every shadow in the water was a potential threat, every distant ripple a possible ambush. Behind the bow, a salvaged P-39 cannon, stripped from a wrecked fighter at Henderson Field, lay ready. It was crude, heavy, and dangerous, but it was all they had. If they could mount it correctly, it might be the one tool capable of turning the tide against these nimble barges. The first shot would change everything, and for the Japanese crews, it would soon earn a name whispered in fear: the Devil Boats. The hum of the PT engine blended with the pounding of Lynch's heart. The night was about to erupt. By mid-October 1942, the Solomon Islands were the focal point of a brutal and grinding struggle in the Pacific. Guadalcanal had become a crucible, a test of endurance, strategy, and ingenuity. Marines had seized Henderson Field on August 7th, claiming a vital airstrip that would determine control of the surrounding waters. The Japanese, unwilling to concede the island, were running nightly supply missions through the Slot, a narrow channel connecting the Solomon Islands. Destroyers and fast cruisers had ferried men, ammunition, and provisions under the cover of darkness, a tactic the Americans called the Tokyo Express. When aerial reconnaissance and combat made destroyer runs too risky, the Japanese shifted to smaller vessels, the Datsu barges. Measuring roughly 50 feet in length, carrying 60 fully armed troops or 8 tons of supplies, and armored with steel plating capable of deflecting rifle rounds, these barges were nearly impervious to the torpedoes of the standard PT boats. Torpedoes designed to strike deep-draft vessels passed harmlessly beneath the shallow-hulled barges. Each night, 20 to 30 of these barges ran the gauntlet, supplying the front lines and frustrating the Allied forces. American PT boats had begun patrols along the Slot, but the results were meager. The boats were fast and maneuverable, but their armament was insufficient. Twin .50 caliber Browning machine guns, capable of devastating wooden fishing vessels, bounced ineffectively off steel-plated barges. Torpedoes, the PT boat's primary weapon, consistently missed shallow-draft targets. Losses mounted. By mid-October, Squadron 3 had already lost 6 PT boats, 17 sailors dead. Squadron commanders experimented with makeshift solutions. Some crews mounted single-shot M3 37mm Army anti-tank guns on their bows. The modifications were crude, gun wheels removed, guns lashed to timber planks, but even a single shot was better than nothing. Lieutenant John F. Kennedy, commanding PT-109, had attempted such a modification the month prior. One shot, manual reload, and the boat was vulnerable the instant the gun could not fire. It was a temporary patch on an insurmountable problem. The real challenge was arithmetic. One barge could carry 60 men. 20 barges per night meant 1,200 enemy soldiers reached the front lines. To disrupt Japanese supply lines effectively, PT boats needed to destroy multiple barges per patrol. Standard machine guns and single-shot modifications could not meet the required output. Henderson Field, just 3 miles inland, was the testament of the stakes involved. Bombed nearly daily, the airfield was littered with wrecked aircraft. Betty bombers roamed the skies with little opposition, while American P-400s, F-4F Wildcats and Bell P-39 Airacobras struggled to maintain air cover. It was amidst this desperation, loss, and improvisation that ingenuity became the most valuable weapon. PT crews could not wait for approval from Navy bureaucracy. They needed solutions immediately with what was on hand. Every wrecked plane, every stripped part became a potential advantage. The Japanese barges had numerical strength, armor, and speed, but they were vulnerable to innovative thinking. If only the Americans could connect the problem with the right tool. From these conditions, the idea emerged. What if the P-39's nose cannon, an automatic 37mm weapon, could be adapted for naval use? The aircraft's unusual design, engine in the rear, propeller shaft running beneath the cockpit, allowed a cannon to fire through the propeller hub. Its high explosive rounds were designed to destroy aircraft, but the potential against lightly armored barges was immediately apparent. The problem was mounting it on a wooden boat. The idea would require ingenuity, sweat, and courage, and if successful, it would alter the nature of PT boat operations forever. By October 20th, 1942, the PT boat crews were acutely aware that conventional tactics were failing. Lieutenant Robert Lynch, commanding PT-48, walked the coral-strewn apron of Henderson Field at dawn. 23 wrecked P-39 Airacobras lay scattered across the strip, victims of Japanese bombing raids and mechanical failures. Engines seized, wings sheared, fuselages broken, but the 37mm M4 cannons protruding from their propeller hubs were intact. No mechanic had dismantled them, no officer had authorized their removal. To Lynch, the solution was clear. These weapons could give his PT boat the firepower necessary to challenge the nightly barge convoys. PT-48 was an Elco 80-foot motor torpedo boat, wooden hull of mahogany planking, deck of plywood over oak frames. Engineers had never calculated deck loading for a 280-pound automatic cannon firing 150 rounds per minute, yet necessity demanded experimentation. Lynch enlisted 3 mechanics and Technical Sergeant James Coogan, an experienced Air Force armorer familiar with every bolt and hydraulic line of the P-39 cannon. Together, they began stripping the M4s from the wrecked aircraft, a meticulous process involving cutting torques, wrenches, and improvisation. Bolts seized from tropical heat expansion, hydraulic fluid congealed, electrical connectors corroded, but slowly, methodically, the cannons were freed. Each cannon took hours to remove. By the afternoon, 3 complete M4 assemblies lay beside the runway, inspected and repaired as needed. Hydraulic recoil cylinders, feed mechanisms, barrel assemblies, everything necessary for operation was preserved. The next obstacle was mounting. PT-48's bow deck was flat, sturdy enough for machine gun turrets, but untested under the weight and recoil of a 37mm cannon. Chief Machinist's mate Donald Frey designed a crude pedestal mount from scrap steel salvaged from landing gear and broken airframes. A 12-inch steel base plate, a vertical pipe, a rotating collar, a yoke to cradle the cannon. Simple, functional, improvised. Welding began in short bursts. The diesel generator powering Henderson Field's machine shop could not sustain continuous operation. Welds were rough, the rotating collar wobbled slightly, but by nightfall, PT-48 had the first aircraft cannon ever mounted on a U.S. Navy patrol boat. Ammunition was equally improvised. 6 horseshoe magazines stacked beside the cannon, ready to be hand-fed during combat. There was no test firing, no official authorization, only a desperate need and the determination to survive. That night, October 21, 1942, PT-48 joined a 4-boat patrol with PT-40, PT-46, and PT-60.
Formation tactics dictated 2 boats north of Savo Island and 2 off Cape Esperance. Radar detected 4 surface contacts at 4,000 yards, Type A Daihatsu barges, carrying troops and supplies. Standard torpedo doctrine required closing to 1,000 yards, but against shallow draft barges it was useless. Lynch pressed forward, closing to 1,500 yards. Visibility was poor, overcast sky, no moon, calm sea. Mitchell, the gunner's mate, manually charged the M4 cannon. At 1,000 yards, the lead barge opened fire with its Type 92 heavy machine gun. 7.7mm tracer rounds stitched the water near PT-48, but the crew pressed on. At 800 yards, Mitchell fired. The cannon roared, muzzle flash illuminating the bow. Recoil drove the gun backward into its mount. The deck flexed, but the pedestal held. High-explosive rounds tore through the barge's steel plating. The 4th round detonated inside the troop compartment. Flames erupted, men jumped into the water, and the barge settled burning in the black water. The 2nd barge exploded under sustained fire. 2 more barges scattered, 1 disabled. 0 American casualties. The engagement proved the concept. A salvaged aircraft cannon mounted on a wooden patrol boat could change the tactical balance in the Solomons. Squadron commanders immediately demanded similar installations. Henderson Field's wrecked P-39s became a controlled salvage operation, and over the coming days, more cannons were mounted, crewed, and tested in combat. The desperation of October had catalyzed an innovation that would redefine PT boat operations across the Pacific. The story of PT-48 is inseparable from the men who made it possible. Lieutenant Robert Lynch was 26, a veteran of 14 night patrols, none of which had yielded confirmed kills. Fatigue weighed on him, yet his focus never wavered. Each crew member brought unique skills under extreme stress. Mitchell, the gunner's mate, had spent hours on aircraft gunnery ranges but had never fired a 37mm cannon from a wooden boat. Chief machinist's mate Donald Frey wrestled with engineering problems that no manual addressed. The crew operated in close quarters, under tropical heat and humidity, working through exhaustion, adrenaline, and fear. For these men, each cannon installation was more than engineering, it was survival. Anxiety mixed with exhilaration as they realized they were creating something unprecedented. Their hands bore blisters, their minds weighed decisions that could mean life or death. When the first round tore through a Japanese barge, the crew's elation was muted by the somber understanding that every battle would demand the same courage.
Before the P-39 cannon experiment, PT boat doctrine relied primarily on torpedo attacks at night. Standard engagement distance for a torpedo hit was 1,000 yards or less, and heavily armed barges with shallow drafts often survived or evaded attacks. The addition of a forward-firing 37mm cannon transformed the engagement envelope. PT-48 could now attack at 800 to 1,500 yards, delivering precise, high-explosive fire without closing dangerously near enemy machine guns. The psychological effect on Japanese barge crews was significant. They had never faced patrol boats with such firepower. Tactically, it enabled PT squadrons to interdict supply lines, strike troop transports, and achieve results that standard torpedoes could not. Commanders recognized that integrating air-based weaponry into naval patrol craft demanded new training, communication, and approach strategies, fundamentally changing night operations in the Solomons. The M4 cannon was designed for the P-39 Airacobra, a high-altitude fighter. Its hydraulic recoil system, feed mechanisms, and barrel construction were optimized for fixed aircraft mounts. Translating it onto a wooden PT boat presented a host of challenges: deck stress, vibration, mounting stability, and ammunition handling. Engineers and crew improvised pedestal mounts using scrap steel and welding equipment under less than ideal conditions. Ammunition feeding required manual handling during movement in heavy seas. Despite imperfections, the system functioned reliably in combat. This hybridization of aviation technology and naval platforms represented an early example of adaptive engineering under war conditions, demonstrating how necessity can drive innovation faster than bureaucratic procurement cycles. Lynch's decision to repurpose aircraft cannons was not officially sanctioned. He weighed risks, structural damage, accidental discharge, and potential court-martial against the pressing need to stop Japanese barge convoys. His leadership style combined calculated risk with clear delegation. Mechanics and gunners were trusted to improvise solutions within a framework defined by Lynch. The chain of command was informal yet disciplined. Decisions had to be immediate, precise, and enforceable. This type of field leadership became emblematic of Solomon's operations, where officers had to operate without direct oversight, relying on personal judgment and the expertise of their small crews. Lynch's ability to integrate diverse skills, inspire confidence, and maintain operational effectiveness under extreme conditions exemplified the human element of small unit command in World War II. Japanese forces had relied on the Tokyo Express, nighttime barge convoys supplying Guadalcanal for weeks with near impunity. The crews of the Datsu barges were trained for speed, stealth, and evasive maneuvers. Type 92 heavy machine guns provided defensive fire, but against PT-48 with its 37mm cannon, those defenses proved insufficient. Intercepts after October 21, 1942, revealed fear spreading among barge crews. Messages described PT boats with aircraft guns and coined the term demon boats. Enemy perception shifted overnight. What had been routine supply runs now carried mortal risk. This reaction forced Japanese commanders to modify tactics, increasing escort vessels, dispersing convoys, and occasionally abandoning barge missions altogether. The psychological impact, fear of a small, fast, heavily armed craft capable of destruction, was as effective as the weapon itself. Every engagement posed moral and ethical dimensions. PT crews faced the dilemma of improvising weapons and risking safety to prevent enemy reinforcements from reaching Guadalcanal. Each barge carried soldiers, human lives, yet the Americans' goal was strategic: disrupt supply lines, reduce Japanese operational capability, and save Marines on the island. The crews reconciled this by focusing on necessity and the imperative to protect friendly forces. Every magazine loaded, every cannon fired represented a conscious choice to prioritize mission over personal risk. The morality of war was never abstract. It was present in the sweat, tension, and split-second decisions made on wooden decks in the dark South Pacific night. The M4 cannon demanded extensive maintenance. Aircraft systems were supported by armories, crews, and supply depots. PT boats were not. Saltwater, tropical heat, and coral dust threatened hydraulic seals, feed mechanisms, and barrel rifling. Technical Sergeant James Coogan was assigned specifically to train PT gunners' mates on disassembly, cleaning, and reassembly. Each cannon had to be meticulously inspected before patrols. Ammunition handling became a central concern. Horseshoe magazines loaded by hand required precision. The improvised pedestal mounts also needed continuous monitoring. Logistical ingenuity extended beyond the combat deck. Teams developed rapid magazine loading, damage assessment protocols, and spare part fabrication from salvaged materials. The ability to sustain the weapon in remote bases like Tulagi was as critical to success as its firepower. The story of PT-48 highlights the tension between field improvisation and formal military procurement. The Bureau of Ordnance normally followed a rigid sequence: design, prototype, testing, approval, and production, a process spanning months, sometimes years. PT crews circumvented this by demonstrating immediate combat effectiveness. Reports, patrol data, and photographic evidence compelled official approval. Within 18 months, the improvised M4 installation transitioned to factory-standard M9 cannons integrated into PT boat designs. This episode demonstrates how wartime necessity can accelerate institutional adaptation, emphasizing the importance of commanders willing to take risks and higher headquarters capable of evaluating empirical results over procedural norms. The PT-48 modification would influence future naval doctrine. The 37mm cannon became a model for integrating air-based armament into small naval platforms. It informed later designs of gunboats, landing craft, and anti-barge operations across multiple theaters. Modern naval innovation continues to draw lessons from such improvisation, rapid field adaptation, creative use of available technology, and training personnel to maintain non-standard systems. The legacy of PT-48 lies not just in its kills, but in proving that small, agile units could employ heavy weaponry effectively against superior logistical forces, altering the tactical calculus of maritime warfare in confined waters.
The air hung thick with humidity over Tulagi. Stars were obscured by thin clouds. PT-48, engines idling softly, drifted at the dock. Lieutenant Robert Lynch stood on the deck, eyes fixed on the horizon. The bow bore a new weapon, a 37mm M4 cannon salvaged from a wrecked P-39 Airacobra. 3 mechanics had worked through the tropical sun, welding, drilling, and assembling a pedestal mount from salvaged steel. The cannon weighed 280 pounds. The deck was plywood over oak framing, designed for .50 caliber turrets, not aircraft cannons. Every bolt, every weld, every rotating collar carried the weight of uncertainty. Gunner's mate Second Class Harold Mitchell sat behind the cannon, 6 loaded magazines stacked nearby. The mechanism had never been tested in combat. Hydraulic recoil systems had been inspected, feed mechanisms greased, but no one truly knew how the cannon would perform against the steel-plated Japanese barges. Lynch had run the calculations. 150 rounds per minute, automatic fire, high-explosive rounds capable of piercing thin armor. A single magazine could cripple a barge, multiple magazines could destroy it. By 23:55 hours, radar detected 4 surface contacts at 4,000 yards, bearing 320 degrees, speed approximately 8 knots. The lead barge carried Type 92 heavy machine guns, the hallmark of the Tokyo Express. Lynch altered course. PT doctrine suggested engaging torpedoes at 800 to 1,000 yards. Those weapons had failed repeatedly against shallow draft barges. Tonight was different. The cannon allowed a new tactic: close the distance, strike decisively. At 3,000 yards, the silhouettes of 4 barges became visible, each 49 feet long, 14 feet wide, engines thrumming. Soldiers crouched on deck, unaware of the danger approaching. PT-48 closed to 1,500 yards. Mitchell manually charged the cannon, the first round seated in the chamber. Safety off. The boat committed. At 1,000 yards, the lead barge detected them, tracer rounds stitched across the water, the Type 92 machine gun marking PT-48's approach. The first round from the 37mm cannon struck home. High explosive shells tore through the steel plating. Flames erupted from the lead barge's fuel tank. Men jumped into the water as the vessel continued burning for 50 yards before settling. The second magazine followed seconds later. The next barge, attempting to escape, exploded in a catastrophic detonation. Mitchell had fired 90 rounds over 3 magazines. The mount held, the deck flexed but did not fail. PT-48's helmsman maneuvered to intercept a third barge. Recoil, heat, and stress tested both weapon and crew. The rotating collar of the mount began binding from thermal expansion. Mitchell muscled the cannon to track the target, every movement precise, every second critical. The third magazine fired. The barge's engine stalled. Soldiers abandoned ship. 2 barges destroyed, 1 disabled, 1 escaped. 0 American casualties. Radioing Commander Alan Calvert at Tulagi, Lynch transmitted a simple message: "The salvaged aircraft cannon works, more effective than expected." The impact was immediate. Squadron 3's boats, previously reliant on torpedoes that often passed beneath shallow barges, now possessed a weapon that redefined tactical tactics. Orders quickly circulated. Every commander wanted the 37mm cannon. The mathematics of supply disruption now favored the Americans. Within hours, crews documented the engagement, noting every hit, every explosion, and every procedural adjustment. Data from that night informed the design of pedestal mounts for the remaining PT boats. Lessons in magazine handling, rotation, and firing angles would save lives in future engagements. The desperation and improvisation of Henderson Field had produced not just a weapon, but a tactical revolution. The night's success was measured not just in destroyed barges, but in morale. Crews understood that ingenuity, technical skill, and courage could overcome superior numbers. Japanese barge crews for the first time feared the dark waters of the slot. Words would soon spread among enemy sailors of demon boats with aircraft guns. The legend of PT-48 and her improvised 37mm cannon had begun.
Dawn broke over Tulagi with a crimson streak along the horizon, reflecting off the calm waters of Iron Bottom Sound. PT crews, still flushed from the previous night's success, gathered to review reports and assess damage. Lynch and Mitchell inspected the 37mm mount. Heat stress had left minor warping on the pedestal, but reinforcement plates applied overnight restored structural integrity. Engineers noted that proper lubrication of the recoil slide and alignment of the feed tray would be crucial in future operations. Commander Calvert, recognizing the unprecedented tactical advantage, ordered PT-48 and sister boats outfitted with the same salvaged aircraft cannons. Crews trained for rapid magazine changes under fire, practiced target tracking, and simulated barge engagements in daylight conditions. Intelligence reports confirmed that Japanese supply barges continued nightly runs from Rabaul and Kolombangara, often in groups of 4 to 6. Each transport carried critical ammunition, fuel, or troops. Losses here could delay Japanese counterattacks on Guadalcanal. On the night of October 23rd, PT-48, now joined by PT-44 and PT-50, embarked on a coordinated strike. Darkness had fallen, with a crescent moon casting dim light over the waves. The boats formed a wedge formation to maximize overlapping fields of fire. The 37mm cannons, now fully integrated into the deck layout, became the spearhead of the attack. At 0015 hours, radar detected 6 barges approaching from the northwest. PT-48 took the lead, engines humming, water churning. Lieutenant Lynch calculated firing arcs while listening to the rhythmic chatter of machine guns in the distance. Mitchell loaded the first magazine. The lead barge, illuminated by faint deck lights, was a perfect target. The first salvo hit center mass. Explosions tore the deck apart. Soldiers were thrown into the water. The second barge maneuvered to flank, but PT-50's cannon had the angle covered. A continuous stream of 37mm shells created a wall of fire across the enemy line. Flames reflected off the hulls, lighting the night with bursts of orange and white. PT-44 intercepted a third barge, disabling engines before the crew could react. Within 30 minutes, 5 of 6 barges were destroyed or heavily damaged. The 6th managed to escape, leaving a trail of burning fuel and debris. Casualty counts were minimal on the American side, though crews were exhausted, ears ringing from cannon blasts. The Japanese loss was substantial. Dozens of troops lost, multiple tons of fuel destroyed, and vital supplies delayed for weeks. Reports later indicated that Japanese soldiers began to refer to the PT boats as Oni no Fune, devil boats, a name that spread fear through naval channels. The tactical implications were immediate. Before the 37mm cannon, PT boats relied on torpedoes with limited shallow water effectiveness. Now, with direct fire capability, they could engage barges at close range, neutralizing them before torpedoes were even considered. Commanders recognized that these improvisations from Tulagi were redefining small boat warfare in the Pacific. Beyond the tactical victories, the psychological effect was profound. Crews of PT-48 and its sister boats carried a quiet confidence, knowing that a weapon cobbled together from salvaged aircraft parts could deliver decisive results. Soldiers, sailors, and officers alike understood the value of innovation under pressure. Even Japanese naval intelligence began noting anomalies, barges lost without warning, survivors recounting a new weapon that seemed impossible from a boat. The legend of the devil boats grew. Word of engagements reached Guadalcanal command posts, inspiring other patrol squadrons to experiment with modified armaments. Technical notes circulated regarding recoil management, magazine capacity, and firing discipline, forming the foundation of a new standard operating procedure for South Pacific operations. By the end of October 23rd, the success of PT-48's 37mm cannon engagements had proven one undeniable truth. Ingenuity, courage, and rapid adaptation could turn a vulnerable patrol boat into a weapon feared across the Pacific. The improvised Devil Boat was no longer just an experiment. It had become a strategic instrument, changing the course of small-unit naval warfare in the Guadalcanal campaign. The next phase would not only solidify the PT boat's role in disrupting Japanese supply lines, but also challenge conventional naval thinking. Could small, fast boats with improvised heavy weapons dominate waters previously controlled by larger, more heavily armed ships? The question hung in the humid night air, foreshadowing the decisive confrontations that lay ahead. By the morning of October 24, 1942, the aftermath of PT-48 and its sister boats' night raids was unmistakable. Debris from burning barges dotted the waters near Tulagi, a stark testament to the destructive potential of small, fast craft armed with heavy-caliber cannons. Intelligence officers aboard Allied command ships documented charred remains of transport barges and floating crates of fuel, ammunition, and rations. These losses, while small in absolute numbers, had an outsized impact on Japanese operations on Guadalcanal, delaying troop reinforcements and supplies essential for sustaining offensive maneuvers. Reports from Japanese survivors painted a harrowing picture. Many spoke of the devil boats appearing suddenly out of darkness, their cannons spitting fire with terrifying accuracy. The psychological effect on Japanese crews was immediate. Hesitation, confusion, and fear became frequent among supply convoys. Official Japanese dispatches later noted the disruption caused by these small patrol boats, marking a significant shift in naval engagements in the Solomons. On the American side, PT crews assessed their own condition. Lieutenant Lynch and his men were exhausted but invigorated by the results. Small repairs and adjustments to the 37mm mounts were made, but overall, the boats required minimal maintenance for continued night operations. The successful integration of aircraft cannons into naval patrol vessels demonstrated the value of improvisation, and naval engineers took note for broader application across the fleet. Strategically, the implications extended beyond mere supply disruption. The destruction of barges forced Japanese commanders to reconsider their logistical routes. Previously confident in the cover of night and shallow waters, convoys now faced the constant threat of PT ambushes. Naval planning documents from the period reveal that Japanese leadership debated alternative supply strategies, including increased reliance on submarines and more heavily armed escort vessels, options limited by available resources. In Guadalcanal's operational theater, Allied forces experienced an immediate advantage. Infantry units reported improved morale, knowing that reinforcements and supplies for the enemy were being delayed or destroyed. Artillery and air units benefited, as Japanese forces struggled to maintain consistent ammunition and fuel deliveries. Each successful PT mission compounded the cumulative effect on Japanese operational capabilities, subtly tipping the balance in favor of Allied forces despite overall numerical inferiority. The innovation of mounting a P-39 Airacobra nose cannon on a small PT boat represented more than a tactical victory. It illustrated the potential for unconventional solutions to shape the broader conflict.
Officers recognized that adaptability, rapid problem-solving, and bold experimentation could yield results disproportionate to the size of the unit involved. PT-48 and its crew became exemplars of this philosophy, their success documented in after-action reports and technical briefings circulated to other flotillas. The night raids also highlighted the human element of war. Crews reported an acute sense of vulnerability and exhilaration simultaneously. The roar of the 37mm cannon, the spray of water as the boats maneuvered at high speed, and the flashes of enemy explosions left a lasting psychological impression. Letters and diaries from sailors of the period describe a mixture of fear, awe, and a quiet pride in having mastered a weapon so unconventional yet devastatingly effective. This combination of tactical success, psychological impact, and strategic consequence marked a turning point in small boat warfare in the Pacific. The PT boat, once considered a minor player, had demonstrated its capacity to influence the flow of operations through ingenuity and audacity. The events of October 22nd and 23rd would set the stage for continued escalation. Japanese forces would respond with greater caution, while Allied commanders began to explore further modifications, training regiments, and tactical doctrines inspired by the Devil Boat phenomenon. The next phase would examine these adaptations and their broader implications on the Guadalcanal campaign. Following the success of PT-48, Squadron 3 quickly recognized that the 37mm Airacobra cannons could no longer be an experimental, one-off solution. Reports from Tulagi emphasized the need for wider adoption. By the end of October 1942, efforts were underway to standardize the modification across all operational PT boats in the Solomons. Salvage crews systematically removed cannons from damaged P-39 Airacobras at Henderson Field, while machinists refined the improvised pedestal mounts for durability and smoother operation. Each installation was meticulously documented. Chief Machinist Mate Donald Frey's initial design served as the blueprint, but iterative improvements soon emerged. Bronze bushings were added to reduce friction in the rotating collars. Mounting points were reinforced, ensuring the 280-pound cannon could fire full magazines without compromising deck integrity. Every successful firing test reinforced confidence that PT crews could now engage Japanese barges at night with unprecedented lethality. Ammunition logistics became the next challenge. Each 30-round horseshoe magazine, weighing 40 pounds when loaded, required hand loading by armory teams at Henderson Field. The workload was intense. 4 loaders working 12-hour shifts produced roughly 40 magazines per day. With each patrol consuming 180 rounds, crews coordinated closely to ensure supply could keep pace with operational demand. This logistical innovation matched the technical ingenuity of mounting the cannons themselves, highlighting the comprehensive nature of the adaptation. The tactical doctrine evolved in parallel. Previously, PT boat attacks relied on closing within 1,000 yards for torpedo launches, often exposing crews to enemy fire. With the 37mm cannon, commanders adjusted engagement distances to 400 to 600 yards, allowing PT boats to disable or destroy barges before Japanese crews could effectively return fire. Paired boat tactics were introduced. One boat engaged directly with the cannon, while the second provided suppressive fire and torpedo backup. These methods maximized firepower and minimized risk, fundamentally changing the character of nighttime PT operations. Japanese forces noticed the shift. Intercepted communications from October and November 1942 referred to devil boats, a term that captured both the surprise and terror of facing heavily armed PTs. Barges began traveling with destroyer escorts, adopting zigzag patterns and dispersing to avoid concentrated fire. Despite these countermeasures, PT boats with 37mm cannons maintained significant disruption, demonstrating the weapon's ability to create tactical and psychological advantages simultaneously.
By November 1942, 8 PT boats were equipped with Airacobra cannons. This number grew steadily as Henderson Field's salvage operations increased efficiency. Teams perfected cannon removal, mount construction, and crew training, reducing installation times from over 6 hours to under an hour. By December, Squadron 6, arriving from the East Coast, was fitted with factory-new M4 cannons shipped from New Caledonia. These guns, pristine and fully supported by hydraulic and feed mechanisms, eliminated many of the maintenance challenges that had plagued salvaged units. The cumulative impact was substantial. Squadron 3 and 6's operations resulted in dozens of Japanese barges destroyed or disabled within a few months. Supply lines across the Guadalcanal campaign were increasingly constrained, forcing Japanese commanders to reallocate vessels, rely more heavily on submarines, or limit offensive operations due to insufficient reinforcements and materials. Allied ground forces noted the effects. Ammunition and food shortages among Japanese units slowed attacks and reduced operational efficiency. Field reports also captured the human dimension of this innovation. PT crews expressed pride in mastering a weapon initially foreign to their training, adapting to both mechanical and tactical demands. Meanwhile, morale among Japanese barge crews suffered as each successful engagement added to a growing sense of vulnerability. Letters, diaries, and captured communications all confirm that the 37mm cannon had not only physical but psychological consequences, creating fear that reinforced Allied operational gains. The successes at Guadalcanal provided a blueprint for broader application. Lessons learned were documented and shared, influencing PT boat operations in the Solomons, New Guinea, and later in the Philippines. The improvisation at Henderson Field, from salvaging wrecked aircraft to constructing pedestal mounts, became a case study in rapid adaptation under combat conditions. It highlighted the capacity of small units to drive strategic effects through ingenuity, technical skill, and initiative, even in the absence of formal authorization. The stage was set for the final reflection on this innovation. From PT-48's first cannon installation to the fleet-wide adoption, the story of the Airacobra 37mm cannon would culminate in lasting tactical and technological lessons for the U.S. Navy. The story of the Devil boats illustrates how necessity can drive ingenuity in war. In the cramped decks of PT-48, a small team of machinists and sailors transformed a standard patrol boat into a vessel capable of striking fear into the hearts of enemy crews. They took a fighter aircraft cannon designed for the skies and adapted it to the rolling, unpredictable seas, a feat that required not only mechanical skill but imagination, courage, and precise coordination under fire. This innovation was more than a technical achievement, it was a tactical revelation. By extending engagement ranges and increasing firepower, PT crews redefined nighttime naval combat in the Solomons. The Japanese barges, once confident in their nocturnal supply runs, faced a new and terrifying adversary. The psychological impact of being hunted by small, agile, and heavily armed boats proved as decisive as the physical destruction inflicted. It exemplifies how asymmetric adaptation can challenge even larger, better-equipped forces. The Guadalcanal campaign, with its desperate struggle for control over the Pacific, was a proving ground for such ingenuity. The success of the Airacobra cannon installation highlighted the value of flexibility and initiative in warfare. Commanders, mechanics, and sailors alike contributed to a chain of innovation that combined strategic insight with hands-on problem-solving. It demonstrated that history is not only shaped by grand strategies or massive battles, but also by small, determined actions that ripple outward to create lasting consequences. In the broader context of World War II, the Devil boats serve as a reminder of human creativity under pressure. They show that even in the darkest nights, on the smallest vessels, bold thinking could alter the course of operations. For the men of the PT squadrons, the cannons were more than weapons. They were symbols of ingenuity, courage, and resilience. Ultimately, the legacy of these small boats with their giant guns lies in their lessons for history, technology, and warfare. Adaptation can turn limitations into advantages. Innovation can transform the battlefield, and courage combined with skill can make the smallest force strike like a thunderbolt. This closes the full narrative of PT boats with P-39 cannons, the Devil boats that haunted Japanese supply lines and left a permanent mark on naval warfare. If this story of ingenuity, courage, and the devil boats moved you, hit that like button. It tells YouTube to share these forgotten World War II stories with more viewers. Subscribe and turn on notifications to join our community of history enthusiasts uncovering the hidden battles, innovations, and heroes that shaped the war. Drop a comment below and let us know, if you were a PT boat sailor on the night of October 21st, 1942, would you have taken the cannon into combat? Where are you watching from? Your voice keeps these stories alive. Every like, comment, and share helps preserve history and honor the men who turned crashed planes into weapons and tiny boats into devil boats.